So 0.3.0 is finally releasing, and it's seeing the introduction of Act 4. So can we get just a very quick breakdown of what can we expect in Act 4?
Yeah, so what we're really keen to do here is have an act that feels quite different than the other acts. So it's very open. You can kind of go wherever you want. You get that feeling of like, you open the map. I could go anywhere. Every island is available for you to choose right from the beginning. And so, you pick one and you sail off in the sunset and have that sort of feeling of exploration. And it's really something, as I said, it's quite different than something else that you've had in PoE. It's nice. It's nice to have that feeling sometimes.
Do you have multiple options, but you're not necessarily required to do all of them?
Yeah, so effectively, that there are 3 things that you need to find on different islands. You actually don't know where they are, and in fact, every league, they actually move around which islands they're on, so there's kind of like you don't always know, like I go to exactly these 3 and make the act really short every time. We actually did quite a lot of dynamic stuff with the quest too, where, depending on which island a particular quest goes on, it actually changes how it works a little bit. So, for example, there's like a Karui elder you need to rescue. Like if in one situation he might be like held by this giant guy on one of the islands, but if he's on this other island, it's like he's been impaled by a spear because one of the shrikes have done that to him. So there's stuff like that that's kind of interesting that we had to do as well.
So then, let's say you immediately get lucky and you find the 3 pieces you're saying you need right off the bat. Is there incentives to continue to go to the other islands?
Of course. So every island is going to have a quest objective that's kind of like you're going to want to do. Like there's like either like static quest rewards or things like that 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 you're going to want. So you probably do want to do it. But I just wanted to make sure that every time you play a new league, you just get that feeling of exploration again. So that's why we want to do that.
Okay, well, that's going to beg the obvious question of what happens after Act 4? Are we going into, Cruel, Act 5, 6?
Definitely, especially with 0.2.0 and everything, we knew that removing Cruel was just like a hugely important thing. Obviously we never really wanted Cruel to exist, right? Like in an ideal world, we would have just had all the acts and that would have been the campaign and everything like that. And so then there is the obvious question, okay, so you finish Act 4, you've done 4 acts out of 6, how does it work? So we were kind of like, okay, well, what if we pulled effectively in PoE 1 where we had the when we released Act 5 and and then there's 5 more acts after that as well. That was kind of that same feeling we wanted to give. So effectively what we've done is we've created 3 temporary interlude acts. And when I say temporary, what I mean is as soon as we add Act 5, they're going to come out again. They're kind of like as cool as we could deliver something. There's obviously a lot of asset reuse and stuff like that, but it will be unique and interesting. There's a storyline to all of them. You can do them in any order. And it's kind of just like your bridge into Endgame. So I think that's going to be pretty fun. And there's a lot of new bosses there as well. So.
And even though we intend to remove them, they are canon. It is, embracing the actual lore of the game and the narrative.
They're sort of untold stories. In fact, the funny thing about this is so we start off with okay, we're going to make these things. We're not going to necessarily put as much effort into them, but then we developed the storyline and everyone started saying, hey, why can't these be in the game permanently? It's so cool. So I kind of had that problem going on a little bit.
Did it give you a bit of a freedom to do something since it's a one-off and it'll be removed later and it's like an interlude act? Did it give you a freedom to put something into the game you might not have been able to before, but you've been kind of wanting to?
It's not so much that. It's more just that you get freedom to not have to have the same I don't know. When you're making new a new real act, as it were, it's you have to do new monsters and every boss has to be completely new. You're not allowed to have any it lets us do a little bit of just fun kind of mix and match and do some stuff like that, which is quite good. But the other thing is nice about it as well is that all that content that we put in there, all of that will go into Endgame as well. So all of the actual areas and bosses and all that stuff, none of that's just going away ultimately. It'll all be there. The main thing that's going away is you won't have that storyline to play through anymore, which is kind of what holds it all together, I guess. So
it sounds like we should expect many new maps in the endgame.
Yeah, there's quite a few. So we're kind of doing a bit with that as well, because we've also got a system where there's kind of new mechanics in the Atlas, which I'll leave Mark to describe about that, since he's more the end-game kind of guy.
Okay, there's a lot going on there. One other thing we've done is we've taken effectively, the interlude's kind of split into a few parts. There's a way to subdivide it. So obviously, right now you have the citadels at the high end to get access to the Arbiter. What we've done is we're going to take the act boss of Act 4, and of those 3 parts of the interlude, we're going to take the final boss of each and have those be kind of uberified in the end game. And you can find them in specific biomes. So the water biome, for example, given that Act 4 is an island act, will have a thing that can appear that's like a big maelstrom in the middle of the water, and you have to find there's various different objectives where you can like dispel the magic of the Maelstrom, revealing the map there, and thus you go there and fight this kind of like uber act boss, which come with their own full reward set. So we're adding 4 new boss mechanics. They're not like, pinnacle bosses, but they are kind of more mid, because I'd actually say you've got your pinnacle of the end game, you've got your start, and in between it's very just kind of linear and there's not too much going on. Like, sure, you got the leagues, but with the actual core mechanics there's not a huge amount of like variance and exciting stuff to find quite yet. Like we got a decent way with adding some, but we need more. So this is a step towards that. So that's like using Uber versions of those things in the campaign there as well. So even when that interlude goes, those mechanics will still stay. Well, unless we decide that we can upgrade them, change them, or do whatever. You never know with these things, but the intention is that they'll still stay as well after the interlude is gone.
It's interesting you bring up the mid-game, because there was something I think in the previous interview with Talkative, you mentioned like the mid-game golf. How big of a golf do you feel is actually there, and how large of a portion you think is added into that?
I would say mostly what is missing there is actually a sense of direction. I think when we're talking to a lot of players, they're like, I get to maps and I don't really, I lost my goals. I've lost my sense of direction of where to go. And so honestly, one thing that we would love to add, I would in particular have been very, very keen for, and we'll get to it certainly later, not sure exactly when, is adding a lot more storylines built into each of these. Like, I would even love for Breach to have a storyline, Ritual to have a storyline, all of these in Endgame, where it's like, you do this, I mean, just random example, we were like, okay, you've got currently the Realm Gate. I wanted the Realm Gate to be a place you actually initially go to, and it turns out it was Doriani experimenting with interdimensional and revealed the breach and unleashed the breach on the world, and turns out it was his fault the whole time. All in his attempt to travel to these alternate, dimensions or whatever, and then you go from there and it's like, oh, well, now you redeem that by defeating the Breach demons, you learn about Breach, you've now got the Realm Gate, and then, there's another objective later and later and later. But effectively having those like core quest lines throughout the end game, giving people a sense of direction and rewards, and leading them to fighting all the bosses, because that's another thing I really like about what a lot of the bosses in Endgame at PoE 1 have done. There's the quest versions where you get to them, you do them, they're a bit easier, you learn that whole narrative, and then you're now in farm mode, which is the hard mode, and getting more of that going on, as opposed to right now, there's, as I said, it's like, okay, there's breaches, you're farming splinters, and then way over here, there's the domain.
I think part of the reason for that is that in PoE 1, because all those things, mechanics, came from the history of being a league, and because when we develop a league, we have a storyline and stuff going on, it kind of meant that there was more to it at the point where it was turned into a more in-game mechanic. And so by nature of the fact that these PoE 2 ones were kind of made for endgame without having that kind of storyline element of it, it kind of meant they missed out on that. So it's definitely a hole that we need to fill, of like making sure that all that stuff's back in there. But that's kind of one of the things with going with the new league that we're making, where because it is being made like as a proper actual league all the way through, there's like storyline stuff going on, there's like different areas, there's like more boss things going on, there's like more mechanics. Like, I think that one, when it does turn into an endgame only thing later on, we'll definitely not have that problem. And then ideally, when we do that, we can also fix some of the stuff with the other ones. Because I would definitely say that the League in Zero Zero is much better at this.
So how did you settle on the league mechanic you did, Abyss? Why Abyss?
I mean, the easy answer there is actually, it might seem underwhelming, is simply because it was easy artistically. We are working on a campaign at the same time, and so we had to pick something what can we reuse, what can we do more on the materials and texture sides of things, as opposed to fully reanimating monsters from scratch and all of that. So there are stuff that's new, but I mean, Abyss comes with 30 to 35 monsters, give or take, which for a league, given PoE 1 historically, obviously there are some that have more and others that have barely come with 10 sometimes. It's got 4 new boss fights.
There's like multiple areas.
An NPC, if you'd call it that, just to be ominous.
The weird, creepy guy.
It's got narrative, it's got lore, it's got multiple areas, like several. It's got like your kind of hub. It's got a area you're finding occasionally, more reflective of the abyssal depths kind of thing. So every so often you're finding that. It's got yet another more in-game area and all that. So it's like, it's way more built, but when you actually look at it, and you wouldn't know, lots and lots of material, reskin, kit bashing, reuse and all that, and it was just easy for us to go, okay, while we're working on this campaign, which gets lots of new art, what's something we can do on the side that isn't going to tax our artists, but we can more rely on our game designers and more materials and texture side.
And mechanically, it's also a lot better better than I think the original League that we were basing on as
hell
well,
yeah.
because like we don't no longer have the backtracking issues. It's just kind of a lot better there. So I think it's also going to be mechanically better as well. Plus, like, you know what? And the thing that I love as well is that we're getting a lot more of those overlapping axes of things that can happen. So you've got the situation where, you know, it interacts with the wisps or interacts with exiles. Like the exile one's really cool, where like exile dies and turns the Lichborn exile near it and that kind of thing. Like, that stuff's really, really cool.
Yeah, so to elaborate on that, it is the if you were to have a exile near monsters near abysses are now affected by those abysses, because to get to that, well, they're open by default. They don't like if you're not following a crack with a pit for crack to pit, so they're open. So your goal, which makes more sense, I would say, is to close it to stop monsters getting out, as opposed to, you open it and then you're now responsible for closing the thing you just opened, and you kind of feel like both the villain and the hero, I guess. Now, it kind of makes sense either way, but either way, if an exile spawns near it, it's being affected by it too. And if you then kill that exile, it gets immediately revived, much like most of the monsters, and the whole thing of Abyss is all this undead bringing everything. Like, its core theme is necromancy and bringing undead back to life constantly. And so, yes, the exile will be reborn as a Lichborn, as we've called it, and their name gets modified, and their entire armor set gets changed, and they now are completely visually different, and they get a bunch of what we're calling Abyssal modifiers, so they're just harder and more rewarding. And they can drop a specific unique item that was made specifically for that. And so even though this is a very rare thing that will occur, and you can't like kite over to it, obviously not, that's abusive, right, and would create some what we call degenerate gameplay. You just wait for the exile to spawn near it, you kill it, you get lucky, and you get an option at custom rewards that is only seen in that, and that's like just one of the many interactions that this has with some of the existing content. Now, it doesn't interact with everything, but it interacts with a handpicked set of things that makes sense. For example, expedition. If an expedition is close enough to an abyss, and you were to put down the bombs like normal for the expedition, well, the abyss is underground down there, and so the abyssal monsters also come out next to those expedition sites, and like that's just that one's less obviously of a cool full custom reward and all of that, but it's still an extra thing that you get to happen, and it's kind of cool.
So you mentioned abyssal modifiers. Can we hear more about that?
When a monster is near an abyss, it is obviously like, so you have your abyss, a monster spawns near it. When that monster is killed next to the abyss, their soul kind of travels down into the abyss, and then a monster spawns. Effectively, an underground undead absorbs that soul and then emerges out of either the crack or the pit. And the idea of it taking its soul is taking its power, its modifiers. So if you kill a magic pack or a rare monster, then magic and rare monsters come out with the same modifiers. They've taken their mods from them. And what happens is there is a chance that goes up over the game for those modifiers to be, I would say, upgraded to abyssal variants. So putting it simply, you have like mana donut, you have like abyssal donut, and it works differently. The name is not correct, but
I was liking abyssal donut.
Yeah, but it's effectively no longer blue mana draining. It's like this green necromantic, and it does something else, and it's harder and more difficult, but also more rewarding. And so, yeah, you're killing a rare next to it, and then the monster that comes up can have one or many of its mods replaced by abyssal variants that are harder, or none, of course. Sometimes it's none, sometimes it's more, so that's like heaps of that random axis of both difficulty and reward. And you can imagine later, once it's core, hopefully, you get things on the Atlas tree that allow you to spec into having more of it and all of that kind of stuff. You can kind of see how that, similar to how PoE1 with leagues go core, you get that investment. But the other thing they do is like the Lich or the Abyssal were kind of separated into a number of factions. So there's like the Black-Blooded, the Well, the Pit, there's like a bunch, and the Lightless and stuff like that. And they each had their corresponding Liches from PoE1. And those Liches, they were defeated, but we'll see what happened to those. You'll have to find out. But ultimately, those monsters kind of belong to each of these. So when you go into an area, you're getting one of those factions of monsters. And each of those factions, as we call them, I mean, they're just a category, effectively, come with a set of, like, Lich modifiers or faction modifiers, whatever you want to call it. So not only can a regular mod be upgraded to an Abyssal mod can then roll again to be upgraded to one of these more special modifiers. So like an example is we're playing on, so Kurgil is one of the liches from PoE 1, the one you encounter in Delph. He has a mechanic where when you defeat him, he gets like reborn with chaos, so all his green converts to chaos into purple. And he's got like a second phase. So we're doing things where like one of his modifiers that is associated to his faction is that now they can upgrade to that, and it's called like Kurgil's Final Gasp. And so when you get the monster to low life, it can like be reborn with purple powers instead of the green powers, and doing a bunch of chaos damage, and again even more rewards. So you kind of got this like multiple layers of modifiers going on here, where they can get either none or up to some number of abyssal modifiers, and then up to one or multiple faction modifiers, abyssal faction modifiers, lich modifiers maybe. You know, we need to give them a proper name yet. And each of those, as they get harder and harder, you get more and more difficulty, more and more rewards. So kind of a lot going on there just within this like little mod system.
You know, in your answer, something I noticed is there's a lot of cognition and making sure it makes sense. Like if this would happen, this other thing would happen. How important is it to you that, you know, the narrative is logical?
I don't know if it has to be logical. It just like there's always detail here where like a player doesn't need to care about the PoE 1 lich.
Sure.
They don't need to know who Kurgil is. None of that is relevant to them at this point.
You have this thing where ideas about theme can inspire mechanics, and it's like you actually get the best mechanics out of that, I would say. So it's like it's really good for us to think about this stuff, because by thinking about it, we design stuff we wouldn't have otherwise designed. And so that's why I think that there's a lot of that kind of goes on. And so like when you're pitching it to someone also, like it really helps with an understanding. Like if you just tell someone, oh, you know, like there's some, like when you do this, it adds like, you know, 23% damage. Obviously that's not exciting anyone, right? So like it's really about the, like, what is the story behind the reason they have plus 23% damage. And that's kind of like the way that you actually make it exciting, I guess.
It helps players fulfill fantasies, and I think that is a very important thing. Like you are playing a fantasy game, you are playing a role-playing game, and there are other people playing a spreadsheet, and there's everything in between. And there are people playing both, and we want to make sure that it's important for everyone. So if everything's all just numbers and damage, that appeals to some people, but a lot of people want to fulfill this fantasy, embrace the world, understand the world, and so creating all of these links as opposed to just it's a modifier and it does some chaos damage. Creating that link mechanically and thematically, and which the thematically then inspires the mechanically and vice versa, and it allows us to create new characters, new villains, new heroes, new everything in the future and all of that by just extrapolating all this. Like it's all one big cohesive thing. But yeah, by doing that, it creates just this, you know, an awesome package, and people can take it as much as they want. They can absorb, they can just be like, it's just the purple thing, or it's just the chaos damage thing, or it's Kurgil's thing, or it's, you know, and then the people in PoE 1 can be like, oh, that's cool, it links to that lich, or maybe most of them will never even know, and that's all fine. All of this is fine, the entire spectrum of, you know, mechanical through to full immersion and everything on that, and 100% fine. So I would say it's more, you don't need to know necessarily anything as long as the mechanic looked like it makes sense and ultimately you're having fun. And obviously the balance and the rewards, which I would say is part of having fun.
Speaking of the rewards, one of the rewards looks quite strong. You have sort of almost like an unveiling. You get to pick one of three different stat lines there. So how did you come to the conclusion that this is the reward you wanted tied to Abyss?
Well, one of the things that we really were worried about was missing is a kind of mid crafting. Like there's kind of like there's some options for like really high end crafting, and then there's quite a lot of like low end crafting type things that people would use like as they're leveling and so on. But it was kind of that mid option, and so I think veiled, like that sort of veiled type system, does work pretty well for that. Yeah. And like, you know, there's also just a lot of mechanics that we do want to eventually do, that we've done in PoE 1 before, that, you know, we want to get to. It's just a question of introducing them in the right place, making sure they sort of fit into the PoE 2 crafting systems. So I mean, you know, like a lot of people will kind of say, oh, you know, PoE 1 has like, you know, better crafting than PoE 2 has. This kind of stuff often comes up. I do think that a lot of that is just literally we haven't had time to kind of get all of that stuff in. So yeah, veiled mods are just one of those things that I think fills that real good mid-tier role that we can do.
But I mean, it goes further than that as well. It's about the mid-game crafting, so it's that you've got your more RNG-based transmutation through to exalts, etc., that you're doing. And then you've got the very top end where the most determinism gets involved, but the most costly gets very expensive. And that will still, you know, each of these systems will get iterated on. I mean, we are iterating on even the initial part of it, which maybe we can talk about after. But that mid bit where there's a little bit of determinism, and decent power and a little bit of control, but it's nothing like super outrageous.
The cost's not too high.
Yeah, is exactly where we want to aim for a few more. So we're even pitching and adjusting essences to fit in that role better as well. So ideally, it's that, yeah, you're doing your whole transmute, exalt, etc. And then over here, you've got your like essences, you've got your now abyssal modifiers, and then at the top, you've got all kinds of other more specific things.
Well, I mean, now what you've got, of course, is the higher tier exalts and stuff like that as well, which will kind of be more of an in-game thing. Which, once again, you're trading cost for determinism. Those exalts are going to be very rare, but then on the other hand, you're going to make sure that you're getting high tier mods. So the way they work effectively is they just guarantee that the mod is above level X, but they're relatively, I can't remember what the actual number is. It'll be like, but they're high, right? Like for exalts, I think it was like above level, like it was like 50 something like that. I think. Something along those lines. Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but
it's effectively you're going to get your T1 to T3 modifier bracket. And
right,
like
exactly.
Nothing lower, nothing worse than that.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
So that's the kind of thing that we also sort of felt like, filling that just like not quite at the very top, but just before the top kind of area as part of the crafting system as well. And so ideally, after we're done here, it's like there are crafting options all the way from the sort of very beginning, the most random to the most deterministic, kind of all the way through, like with a nice sort of bridge going from one end to the other.
So you're talking about the new currencies, and you say they're going to be rare. How rare are you trying to get these to be?
So that's going to depend on what type. So if you're talking transmutes, they won't be that rare, right? Like it's actually pretty fine to just let someone get a T1 mod on a magic item guaranteed. That's effectively the same as a high-level T5 magic, like on the ground T5 magic that you would that you would get. So that one won't be too bad. For the exalts, though, those are going to be pretty damn rare. Like I think that they might be a bit rarer than divines. Fairly up there, but it's going to kind of depend. We actually do need to crunch some numbers and work out like, well, how valuable actually is this? Like, where do we need to actually pitch this at? We did like a kind of initial pass of getting it sort of somewhere, but that's more by eye. So now we're going to have to go and like run the simulations, like look at the things to actually see what's going on there. But I definitely don't expect to be getting the highest tier exalts very often. Like those are going to be pretty rare.
How about the essences? Are you trying to get those to do that mid-game crafting
So
you're talking about?
So the thing that we noticed with the essences is I was saying to myself, why do I never use an essence myself? Like, why am I just not using them? I get them in the early game and I just don't end up using them. We had to do something about that. And there's always been this thing as well with the early game of not... like people feel like they don't get enough regals, which I do agree with, but we couldn't really necessarily give out too many more of those without affecting the end game too much. So the nice thing with the essences now is they come with a specific mod, and that's the mod you can see. And because there is tearing of essences, it means that the in the earlier game, effectively every essence you get is now a regal, which means that the regal drop rate is effectively increased because you've got that effect of upgrading to a rare. But you've also got a specific mod, and it's like not too powerful at the end game, so you're really encouraged to use it early as well. Like there's no point saving these essences till later because then the mods won't really be valuable either. So I think it really does do that kind of like earlier game kind of like like it's valuable there. It makes sense there. You're getting the feeling of upgrading to rares more often. Like I think it does a lot to sort of help that part of the game.
Now, in terms of later game, we have basically superior quality coming to the game and the rarer extra sockets. So why decide to bring superior back, and in particular the extra sockets?
Well, we wanted to just make sure that there's enough chase things that are interesting at the really, really late game, right? Like, there are some people who would argue that the game begins at, like 79 map tier, you know what I mean? Like, the like level 79 of mapping. And so for those people, you really need somewhere to go in terms of like making sure the itemization is continuing, that there's still a chase, so you can do that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it really just comes to that. What could we do? There was definitely a little bit of skepticism of like, is it really okay to have more sockets and that kind of stuff? But I think it'll be fine. Like, I don't know if you've got any opinion on that.
No, I think it is fine. I mean, we've added a lot more socketable synths. We're adding even more.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Again, another thing with Abyss, we're adding there's 4, I guess you could call them unique socketables, so you can only have one of them equipped, and you have to pick which one you want. And like, so we're even ascending that. I guess you could think of it like the unique jewels, where they have a limit to one kind of thing. So you're getting gear socketables that have a bit of that going on. But yeah, I mean, we're only going to continue to add more. There'll be just more pressure there, more interesting crafting, and So like obviously when you get to Endgame, you get a lot of new socketables that you haven't seen before. You start to use those, and now you're like, okay, how do I take my gear further? Okay, I want either the quality or the extra quality or the extra socket. Depending on the slot, you might have different answers.
And corrupting those is going to be a bit of a thing. To get another
then
socket
you
is going to be a bit of a thing.
those,
Yeah,
and
yep.
just more and more of those layers. It is ultimately adding power, but it's also adding a lot more interest to the drops, a lot more excitement to the drops.
And it really just it will have the feeling of expanding what can be crafted in the game, which I think is good because like PoE 2's crafting is very additive for the most part, so that means that you need enough things to add that you can add to sort of get that same feeling of being able to craft an item from scratch in order to kind of like if we're ever going to make it get to the feeling where it feels as open as PoE 1 but without falling into some of the traps that you have in PoE 1, I do think that you need to have enough of those additive layers that you can actually do some interesting stuff with it.
So comparing to PoE 1, how have you had to adjust the quantity of these drops you're going to be receiving? Because, for instance, in PoE 1, you have things like splitting or scour orbs, for instance. So when you get a base item, the base item is quite important, but, you have opportunity to have it maxed out. In PoE 2, let's say you miss the slams, the item doesn't complete. Mm-hmm. Are you having more quantity of these rarer types of items in PoE 2?
Well, I think that the solution to this problem is so if you're talking base types, is that kind
of
yeah,
the bases.
So I actually agree that this is a little bit of a problem, and we're actually starting to think about whether or not some of the higher item tiers, which is sort of an internal term for how our item drop system works, some of those should start to reintroduce white items, but sort of guaranteeing that they're high tier ones as well. Like I think that there might be a slight lack of white items in the higher tiers, but the other thing as well is that the other way we're solving that problem is by effectively adding more determinism at a cost. Right? Because if you know that that your Exalt Slam is going to at least guarantee a mod above a certain level, like the chance that you're going to get something that's actually good is much higher. So that means that you're not going to need to burn through as many white items. So I think that's kind of another way to sort of approach fixing that too. Reducing determinism as you get to the higher tiers of crafting is one of those things that will mean more people actually want to engage with it too. So I think you kind of end up helping in a few fronts by doing that kind of system.
So let's change gears for a moment here and let's talk about the support gem change. Mm-hmm. You guys are going to many tiers of support gems. What was the thought process there?
Well, so we definitely had... Okay, so from the moment that we did the whole limit 1 support gem per character thing, we knew that there was going to be some repercussions of that. But the thing that we didn't want is just you to put like every single skill is just the same set of supports, right? That was the issue that we had with that, and the reason why we kind of couldn't have it so that it was any other way. So we were really racking our brains, like how can we, like at the same time you've got an issue where it's like, okay, if you're going to play like a poison build or something like that, you kind of need that poison stacking support on multiple skills in order, like if you're going to have combos with multiple skills being involved, you do need to have it so that you can kind of support some of those things in some of the same ways in certain cases, right? So we're kind of like, okay, like one thing we were thinking about is, do we have it so that you can have like different limits on every support? Like there was stuff like that we were kind of thinking about, but it just didn't feel right and like kind of wasn't cool. And then we came to the idea of, okay, what if there were multiple levels for each support, but there aren't the same number of levels for each one, so we can effectively control the limit of how many times you can get this mechanic by saying like how many levels of that support exist. But at the same time, you're also going to get the nice feeling of, even if you do use one of them, you're upgrading the one that you've got, like you're getting the higher tiers, like you kind of get that feeling of advancement through the game as well. So that kind of solved two birds with one stone, I would say, especially because with the only 3 tiers of supports that we have in PoE 2 right now, there actually was kind of this like mid-game, like by mid-game I mean middle of campaign, kind of like level 40-ish like dip in like the feeling of advancement. Like you didn't have that like the advancement feeling like around level 40-ish, I would say, like for going towards maps. Like there's just kind of a big gulf there. And so we're also going some of the way to kind of improving that feeling as well, that there's more there that's actually going to advance your character. So it's kind of trying to solve like all of these problems at the same time. But I would say the new support system really does help with that. But the other nice thing it gave us an opportunity to do is I'm not sure what name we're going to finally go with, but we're currently calling them lineage supports. Like these supports that you have that are drop only, they're kind of treated like uniques. They kind of come from specific bosses in some cases. They're kind of like, they drop like uniques in the way that they're, some of them are rarer than others and that kind of stuff.
And those aren't uncuts, by the way.
Those aren't uncuts. So they're drop only, right? Yeah. So effectively, if you want a specific one, like you might have to farm a specific boss. You might have to, trade for it in some cases, things like that, relatively rare, that kind of stuff. Having those as kind of like pinnacle power that you can use to complete your character by sort of adding like a few extra things was also like a really attractive thing to be able to do with this as well. So I just think there wasn't enough to the support gem game before, and so adding the stuff I think should improve that a lot.
You say pinnacle power. How much power is pinnacle power? How much stronger are these gems?
That I guess probably remains to be seen. Like at the time of this interview, we're still like relatively early in like the actual like part where we like measure the like where that goes.
A
to,
way
but
to
it's
think of
certainly
it
gonna
is similar to like unique items. You're going to have ones that are more build enabling, build changing, and you're going to have all the way through to the ones that are just like spike power.
I mean, some of them can be incredibly rare, like uniques are, and like and that's definitely good. Like that will be a thing that you definitely have, like the real chase ones, and some of them will be more common. You can just like you can build around it, but it's kind of an end, towards the end of Endgame. Sorry, the beginning of what some people would say is the start of Endgame, which is 79 tier sort of.
So they're not always just linear upgrades to the previous tier. They're fundamental
They'll
changes.
often have stats.
They'll be pretty more out there.
Yeah.
It'll be something called Lionize something, and it's like, the lineage being Lionize lineage, and it's themed around something either accuracy or like long distance and more around that, as opposed to, and sure, you might see it as a, something in the sequence to one of the existing accuracy or like far shot like ones, but I can't remember the names of them, which is a different problem altogether. So you might see it as the next in line for that, but I mean you can also just use both in most cases, depending on what they give. So we have a new way to restrict how they are used together in some cases, because what is allowed us to do is to make sure so that you can't just go hit 5 different multi-prod supports. Because you, for example, will have multiple projectiles tier 4, and you obviously can't use that with multiple projectiles 3 on the same skill, but you can use those on different skills. So that's great. So now your lightning arrow and your lightning rod, for example, one of the most obvious ranger cases, both can get additional projectiles. Perfect. But then you have, the spiral volley support. Well, what does that do? It's like, it fires some higher number of projectiles in a volley around, like the spiral volley skill currently offered to ranger.
Allowing that to stack with multiple projectiles would not be great. So effectively what we can do is put them in the same category together, so one skill can't both have spiral volley and multiple projectiles, and that way we can kind of allow to sort of restrict that way. So that's kind of how we can control a few cases like this. So in some cases we've got a couple of different supports that might be in the same category, but we're generally trying to be like pretty open with what we allow. But yeah, there is the nice thing is like previously if we were like, okay, we want to add a new way to like multiply projectiles, we would have to like look at it and be like, what could it add to, but with all these other things?
Sure.
Again, kind of that might actually prevent adding something like that. Now with the category system, we can say, okay, here's a new way to do this thing. We can lock it out with a few other things so that you don't have to worry about that stacking case. And we've got a little bit more control over that. So it's kind of a nice balance.
When we do the lineage one, if we were to say, not that it is, that there's a Lionize one that's called Block Out the Sun, and it's like got a Roman archer theming going on, we at least now know it can't just stack additively or multiplicatively with spiral volley and do some outrageously thing that's going to crash all the servers. So we actually get to open up our ceiling of what each support now can do as well.
And I actually think this is going to be one of the things that's going to improve build diversity the most in 030. Like, I think this is probably, of all the changes, so we're making a bunch of changes to skills, obviously, but I actually think it's the support change that'll be the larger change, because it allows, like, there are currently a lot of combos that can't scale because you can't support enough of the stuff in the build, and being able to do that now will definitely be a thing, so it should really open up what can happen.
Did this require to do a pretty wide scale sweep of balance?
Yeah, absolutely. It still requires that. There's a lot more balance happening.
That's why it's actually a little bit hard to talk about the specifics of what they're doing, because they're probably all going to change over the next short while.
And I mean, this is going to be another balance nightmare we're just walking straight into. So no doubt there's going to be broken shit. It's going to be like a whole thing.
We might run into the same answer then, but I got to ask about the passive tree coming up in 0.3. Can we expect changes, or maybe it's announced in the video I haven't got a chance to see before this?
Yes, 100%. So currently we are looking to add 150 or so notables. Or overhauling existing ones, and they come within the clusters, so I'd expect like up to say 500 additional passive points on the tree, give or take. One of the main motivators or motivations we have here, of course, being that we want to have a bit more fantasy fulfillment going on. So instead of, again, just like, X% more damage, and we talked about a lot of this with the Abyss stuff, but it's more okay, I want to become a huntress that embraces, there's the whole Asmerian thing of each Asmerian is picked by a certain spirit. So you're picked by the Great Bear and you're picked by the Winter Owl, and they have their kind of affinity to that. And so I was like, well, let's add 10 notables in the Ranger Huntress section that are each representing one of these different things. It's just like, what does it mean to become to embrace a huntress that is embraced by and embraces the Great Bear? I'm like, okay, well, so now it's like I've got a little bit of bear going on. What does that mean? And so obviously you get a little bit of life and a little bit of these other things that are like, okay, a bit more bear aligned, or you're durable, or there's regen and that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, the owl has like mobility, but also has cold damage. And so you're getting these kind of hybridizations of stats that normally would be very separate, while also going, okay, I want my character to fulfill this kind of, I want to build it this way by embracing these kind of cultural and immersive things. Now, you can just look at it and go, here's a notable that gives me cold damage and movement speed. Again, you don't have to care about that whole owl thing or any of the sort, right? But it's more about thinking of it that way and seeing what the notables can then give, and then we go back from there and go, okay, now what do the clusters give that fulfills that even further? So what you're actually getting out of it is a lot more notables that I would say are generally pretty powerful, and they are often offensive and defensive hybrids and or fulfilling more utility roles. And you could see them as a bit more niche, but I'd actually see them as quite often a bit more general and a bit more chase in that regard, and that you're getting like a pretty decent overall improvement to your character. So you'd obviously want to pair this with a lot of the existing stuff, but yeah, I mean, ultimately we're adding 20 or so of these to each section of the each class section of the tree, making sure there's here's the set of witch, occult-oriented ones, sorceress ones, elemental ones, through to monk, for example. Now there's a bunch of notables, each representing a different kind of chakra. So there's like, chakra of the mind. What does that mean? Well, probably there's, all the way everything intelligence aligned, mana region aligned, but it could be like trigger skill, meta, energy aligned, that kind of stuff. Through to the Asmerian spirit stuff in the kind of Huntress Ranger section. In the mercenary, there's all kinds of stuff. Like there's one called Spray and Pray. There's one called Run and Gun. You can imagine what they're going to do. And then there's maybe not Run and Gun. We might rename that, but that's my internal name so far. And then you've got all the warrior ones. You got a bunch of blacksmith-oriented things, given the warrior's a smith, through to, and again, you can already imagine like what is a node that says you're an elite blacksmith. How are you using that blacksmithing skills to either survive or kill stuff? You can derive from there. And then you've got all the Karui gods, like different tribes. So you've got Kaum and Namahu, and you've got all those pairings of chieftains and gods, and what does it mean to embrace their power? So utilizing this, we're getting a lot more, everything from ailment mitigation to interesting different kinds of damage that are beyond just 13% increased damage, 15% increased damage, etc. So ideally they would act as more multipliers as well, and you're getting different things of where you want to build. But it should make, aside from also filling in the density, it also mean you're just not just like, oh, okay, now I've run out of stuff, I just got to travel way up here, and you get that like 6 levels of just like attributes. It can be, I mean, that's sometimes just cool if you're going for like a keystone and stuff like that, but it should be less pressure to feel like you have to do that, especially at endgame. Generally a bit more dense, a bit more interest going on, a bit more fantasy fulfilling, and obviously more power. So yeah, that's ultimately where we're going there. There's some new keystones. There's currently a sorcerer's keystone that converts all of your fire spells to chaos visually as well, which I think is very, very cool. So all of a sudden now you're this like chaotic black flame mage.
Okay.
It also makes your ignite deal chaos damage, and I don't know, to see what you can do with that, I guess. That's just like one thing. There's another one that's currently kind of themed around auto bomber, and so what it does is it takes your invocations, and instead of deploying them all in one go, it's going to go, okay, it's going to, when you use your invocation, it's going to cast the spell once per, say, second, instead of, just a giant bomb. And the bomb is great for a single target, but all of a sudden now you think, okay, I'm going to put something big AoE on that, I'm going to build up as much energy as I can, hit the invocation, and now it's like I'm ice novering every second or something, so you just run around doing novas for a longer period of time, of which you cannot generate energy during that time, just so that you can't infinitely do it. But the point being, it like transforms your invocations from a nuke to a more sustained auto bomber playstyle. As just 2 random examples in the more sorcerer section.
Is this way of looking at the passive tree a newer philosophy, or is it something you sort of always have done?
It was originally actually done this way in Path of Exile 1. So Eric was actually a pretty big part of the passive trees, making sure the passive tree was fulfilling world building elements as well, where again it is, I want to fulfill a fantasy for my character. What can I do? As opposed to, I want to play a crit build. These are two different ways of thinking about it, and they can achieve the same goal. Now, they can both exist, and they should both exist. And I would say that our iteration of the Path of Exile 2 tree, as of live, pre-030, is very much towards, I want to do build A, I want to do build B, I want to do build C, and there's tools for that. Now, I'm not even saying that that's 100% executed perfectly, but now it's going, okay, both of these things exist, and we're going to keep extrapolating on that. And I'd say that, the initial version of PoE2's tree didn't have that kind of fantasy fulfillment side of things, which the PoE1 tree, but that being said, of course, the PoE1 tree went through many iterations and still deserves them. It has many, many systems and all that. So, like previous to the masteries in PoE1, all of those interesting stats were on a lot of the notables, and so it did get simplified down, but the masteries were there. And then in PoE2, we were like, okay, we want interesting stuff everywhere. And we didn't quite execute that, not even quite. We just didn't execute that well enough. There is some, but there's not enough. So this is an attempt at both adding more fulfilling fantasies, adding more power, adding more density. I mean, all of that, really. It should just be ultimately more fun. And I would say nothing overly complicated. Like we've not added keywords everywhere. It's all pretty still straightforward, just kind of a bit more, it might be a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I should take this or this, but that is the kind of interesting decision someone should be making. Where neither could be wrong, one could be wrong, one could be right, sure, but at the end of the day, it's not like all of a sudden there's like 700 new mechanics. It's reusing a lot of existing and more familiar stuff. So I don't want people to also think, oh my god, it's too complicated now, because I would say it's still keeping that nice simplicity and still has the whole mousing over nodes showing you what they do and all of that. So.
Can we expect any changes to Ascendancy classes as well? Has it got kind of the same overhaul that passive trees have, or...?
Each is being looked at, yes, 100%.
It's a little bit hard right at this exact moment to talk about how much of that's going to get in, because we certainly have a lot of plans for a lot of things, but there's like quite a lot that is still may or may not make it.
I mean, there are some things that have to change, like for example, the Gemling Legionnaires, like you can use two of the same support. Kind of doesn't now work the same way due to the support changes, so now it is you can use two of the same category of support on the same skill. Now, I don't know if that's going to stay all the way through to release, because we're currently a bit scared of it.
I'm a bit worried about that for sure.
But if all of a sudden you can use two of the multiple projectiles.
I don't know if that's going to be okay.
Yeah, so the issue being there, as I said earlier, what allows us to do the crazy stuff is that we know they can't be used together. So if all of a sudden this enables that, we might have to go back on that. So there's stuff changing just as a consequence of our systems, and it's hard to say where they'll end up. But we are doing just a pass on each, looking at, for example, we redesigned I believe it's called Advanced Thaumaturgy notable on the Gemling yesterday, because it has an extremely low usage, lowest of all the notables by far on that tree, and we came up with some alternate designs for that. We've added a new notable to Witch Hunter. We've changed one of the existing notables on Witch Hunter. We've embraced more of the totem ballista thing with Tactician, just as the three mercenaries one being fresh on my mind since I was talking about them yesterday. So doing a lot of that. So yeah, you expect some cooler totem notables on Tactician. You can expect we're obviously changing skills everywhere. We're changing how banners work, and thus obviously the tree changes to that. So we're ultimately making banners way better, making all the changes adjacent. But we're changing so much stuff with so many skills that it's impossible to then have to not change the ascendancies just to fit the new mechanics and embrace those better. And so just even by consequence of that is happening. So I'd expect changes to pretty much every single class, bar a few, I would say, be it small changes all the way through to several new nodes, all the way through to some of them getting a bit more of a grander redesign.
What is currently the least played class and why?
Ascendancy or
Ascendancy. Ascendancy.
It kind of varies a little bit from league to league, depending. There's a little bit of SSF versus non-SSF.
Yeah, fair.
But overall, I think it's maybe Acolyte of Chiola right now. I don't know. There's a bunch of them at the bottom that are all in the kind of 0% played kind of range.
And the fundamental issue there, I would say, is that we don't have something for chaos damage to really be that's interesting enough. Like, we had a whole conversation a while ago about like why would you even want your damage to be chaos? Like, there currently isn't really like a real reason.
And this is excluding the kind of dot archetype.
Yeah, sure. The dot archetype's got a thing.
They have a reason.
Yeah. But in terms of chaos hits, it's like there isn't really a reason to do it. So we've had quite a lot of conversations about what they could be. Like, there was discussion a while back of like, should there be an ailment that chaos does? We dumped quite a bit of time into trying to work out what that would be with like 20 different ideas, and there's always an issue when you're dealing with something like this where it's like a damage type of like, it has to be really fundamental. Like, you can't do some weird sort of like thing that only affects a few builds or kind of like feels like really complicated. Like, if it's like, this is what chaos damage does, it has to be fundamental enough that you would think that, okay, like, yeah, I can see that. And chaos being the kind of like least real world analog element is kind of quite hard to design for in that regard. So I don't think we've like fully come to a conclusion on that yet, but yeah, we do need to do something about chaos damage. This is something that we will be looking at probably, I suspect, before 030 is done. We'll have an answer to that question of what can chaos damage be.
Well, speaking of Monk, a new addition that's, I suppose, like maybe half a new weapon is you have the Hollow Palm coming to the game. So why did you guys decide to add the Hollow Palm in 0.3? We intended Hollow Palm to be in 010, and then we intended it to be in 020, and now we're intending it to be in 030. So I really hope it doesn't get cut again. But effectively, it's just, it requires so much work to actually finish, because for every single quarterstaff skill, you have to effectively remake the skill again, but with no weapon, right? So effectively, it's just a bunch more work than what it first appears, and there's so many balance considerations like random issues. It's just a very complicated thing to execute. But effectively, we always wanted to have unarmed be a thing because it was a thing in PoE1. There's like a bunch of people who want to be able to do it, so like, it's just this is the way that happens. Yeah,
face breakers soon.
Yeah, exactly right. You need face breakers. It's a classic thing. We needed to have a way.
What's harder when developing that, trying to get the balance right or getting the animations?
Oh, I mean, it's just a bunch of work to make skills right. And the thing is, it's so easy to cut as well, because it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, there's like a huge amount of work there, and we've got this other thing that's going to be important for everyone, and this is just this one thing that's only important for some builds. So yeah, I think that's why it got sacrificed a few times. But,
when you don't have, again, we're still working on campaign classes.
Yeah,
all
exactly.
Of this. So it's like, all right, are we willing to just go and make this full other, like, effectively 10 skills here that we have to make, that are for just a keystone? Like, it's often easy to say it's just a keystone. It's not the core skill tree of a different class. And so it gets chipped away at, as opposed to, worked on with the utmost priority. And then eventually it gets close enough, we're like, all right, let's get it across the line and then just finish it. And so we put all our focus on it for a bit.
I think it's like, that stuff's so important though, because it's part of the soul of the game.
100%.
Like, you have this thing of like, when you see something like that and the amount of effort that went into it, like, that's when you really think, oh yeah, like, these guys care about this and that sort of stuff.
And that's what I mean. Just a keystone. I'm not saying it's. I don't agree with that. It is easy to look at it that way, but each keystone can be huge.
But it's also to do
and,
like similar idea with the amount of effort that we're putting into uniques. Like, we want to make sure that like we're doing better than what we've done before in terms of making sure that each unique's like really cool. So I mean, that cannon foot thing is like really awesome. It's just like you've got a unique that turns your leg into a cannon, and then you can then use it to rocket jump effectively across the map. So
there's cool detail there. There's like, if you're, depending on which ground material you're walking on, it will tink and create a little
like
spark
sparks.
if it's metal,
really cool.
and like so you're getting like step tink, tink. And then obviously you press spacebar and just flying across. It's quite fun doing that. But I love the new direction with the unique items being more. I mean, ultimately a way of looking at it is that ultimately each one of them is. Well, a lot of them now are kind of coming with a built-in skill that's unique to that, as opposed to just like, there is room for just like, here's this more stat-driven, changes how your build is a little bit, but I think you can do that while also, and again, this comes back to, and you're going to hear me saying this all the time, that whole fantasy fulfillment. I love asking the question of like, okay, you were a pirate, your leg got blown off, and normally you'd expect a peg leg. Well, they only had a cannon, and they chucked it there, and for some reason it's operational. So it's like, what does that look like now? And all of a sudden you can have some fun with that. But we're doing a lot more of that. So a lot more of the uniques come with skills built in. that do have interesting mechanics that synergize with other skills.
It's like I really
more
think
utility.
like one of the issues was in 0.1. It suffered from that same issue of like we designed these really awesome uniques and then a bunch of them got cut for time because it's like, oh, we're putting so much effort into this one item. Like there's always that argument. It's just really hard to kind of defeat that when you're when you're coming up to time pressure. So it's really good we're starting to finally be able to put some of those cooler things in now.
Yeah.
So speaking of time pressure, you guys recently said you changed your way of developing from locking in what's going to be in the league as opposed to when is going to be in the league. How's that going for you?
Well, we immediately launched in August later than we were initially hoping to, so we kind of broke it a little bit there, but hey, we're still in the same month we said, so I'm going to say that that's the promise kept as far as that's concerned. But look, I mean, it is such a much better way of development. I mean, we always knew this, right? Like, we knew it back when we were doing PoE 1 leagues that was important, and it was really only, like, getting PoE 2 shipped that ever made that break. But effectively, you're going to deliver a better experience when you look at it that way because, like, the endless slips are just, like, not good for anyone. It's just really bad. So I think it's good. Plus, like people can have an expectation of when things will happen. Like you're committed to a schedule. Like it's just overall a better it's a better vibe.
Consistency is very important.
King. And it is so hard to actually have the balls to cut something you think is really important rather than delay a date. It is really really hard to do that. And in some cases, it can kind of feel like, oh, this is so vital we could never cut it. Like there was at one point though, like so I'm one of these guys who likes to kind of question every assumption when it comes to like doing this stuff. So at one point, I was like, should we cut Act 4 from 030? Like, that was an actual thing that was on the table to potentially do. And eventually we decided, no, we can't really do that. But it's like, I do think that it has to be the kind of thing you're prepared to do in order to be able to meet that kind of commitment. And, we didn't know how to do it, but like, because we realized that if we did, it wasn't going to really, improve anything about the time pressure that we were facing. Like that's as I said, I feel like that still would have been preferable to not making August if we would have had to do that. So, and the funny thing is like it's not like there is a shortage of anything of other stuff coming in 0.3 anyway, right? There's tons of shit in here. Like even probably just from this conversation, there's all sorts of detail in there that I think will make it a lot of fun.
Speaking of cuts, I know something that people are going to ask is about the Druid. So I got to ask: was the Druid originally slated for 0.3?
It was going to be in 0.3. In 0.30 it got cut.
Where is it in the development process right now?
Animation system hell is what I'll say. So effectively what it is that like getting the whole transformation stuff, it's like there's so much detail in the animation system you need to get right to be able to do it well. And it's like in every single animal form we add also adds a lot of complexity around like exactly how that's going to look and how it's going to act and like all the stuff, all the little details about that. So it's really hard. So the worst thing that you have when you're in game development is like if you have a dependency where like one guy has to work on something for like 2 months to even get to the point where you can see whether it's going to be good. Like this is a really hard thing because it means that like a bunch of other work that other people might do could be wasted if it doesn't work out. And so the Druid got into a situation where it was like, okay, like the next change we have to make here is like a huge like one person just has to work on this for ages and then we will know like what can happen. And it's like when you're in that situation and you're like looking down the barrel of like a fixed deadline, you're like, okay, maybe we can pull everything out of the bag and like get everything like sorted, or maybe we can do a bunch of development in advance where we don't know whether any of that might get cancelled, or we can just commit to like not having it in this expansion, do a bunch more work on other stuff that we know can definitely happen. And so it's like when you're looking at that trade-off, it was a really hard thing to say, okay, we're going to keep the Druid. So at some point, even though we were planning on doing that, we just said like, you know what, like none of the work we've done is going to get thrown away that we've done already, but having to change, having to commit to this now is going to hurt the other work we're going to do. So we decided to cut it in the end. And I think it was the right move for sure. Like obviously there's going to be a bunch of people disappointed by that, but I think that the amount of extra features and cool shit that 0.3 is going to have in it because we made that decision is definitely worthwhile.
So one other thing people have been asking for was movement speed, and in a way we've been getting that in 0.3. So let's talk about sprint. How'd you guys come across the idea of sprint?
Well, obviously the whole like, big areas, levels are a slog, like game pace things is on people's mind, right? This is something that we definitely knew we wanted to solve. And we didn't just even want to solve it one way. There's like various things that we're doing in terms of like just kind of a lot of minor tweaks here and there to kind of improve stuff. But we did know that we need sort of some major headline, like, look, this is a thing that is like going to go a long way to solving that kind of stuff. So at the same time, I was kind of like, I don't want to break the combat system. I don't want to have a situation where now suddenly you can just, like the combat is compromised. So we're like, okay, there needs to be some kind of cost to this that's going to kind of make sense in terms of like, like fitting into where the combat system is. So, and then we sort of started looking how other games solve this problem. So we sort of looked around a few of them, and then the idea of like dodge roll followed by sprint was something that a couple of other games have done, and we're like, you know what, actually that could maybe work pretty well. The other cost that it has is that while you're sprinting, if someone hits you, then you fall over, and like you don't want that to have happen. So effectively what it means is that it doesn't interact with the combat system directly, because you can't do it while you're in combat. You have to effectively either, if you're running away from a monster, you dodge roll first and then you go into a sprint in order to run away, so that's fine. And if you're using it to go between pack to pack, then you effectively dodge roll at the end of your previous combat, like go into the sprint, and then you get to the next pack, you can launch straight into another attack that sort of brings you out of sprint mode immediately as you do that. But while you're actually fighting, you're not in a situation where the move speed's going to completely compromise the way the combat works. So you can pretty much outrun any monster in the game. So you do have that thing where, like, if you need to get out of there, that you have that option all of the time. But like in terms of in combat, we don't have to like re-engineer all the frickin' monsters in the game in order to deal with the fact that this exists, and that's kind of like one of the really important things that we had to do.
Yeah, previously you mentioned that if you can move quick enough, then combat becomes optional.
Yeah. And that definitely is the case now. Combat is effectively optional now. That like is just kind of one of the crosses I just have to bear with this. And obviously, there's the whole thing of like, but you want to kill the monsters, and that's true, you do. But yeah, definitely it is the case now that if you want to get out of combat, I should say that if you want to not be like in a swarm right now, that is definitely an option that you have. There are monsters that can kind of like almost keep up with you while you're sprinting, even if they're not faster than you. But you're pretty much, but I don't think there's any monsters now that are actually straight up faster than you. Like you can always run away, and like, the few fast monsters that are chasing you become separated from the rest of the combat, and then you can kill them, that kind of stuff. So you've got kind of that going on as a combat mechanic now. I think overall that it's an improvement. I was actually pretty worried. Like, even if I don't necessarily agree with something, I still like to try it just to see how it feels. And this is one of those things where it's like, this is a thing that I think we can try, see how it feels. And after trying it, I would say that it does fit. It does work. You don't like. There are going to be people who are using it all the time. I think there are going to still be other people who don't feel like they need to use it all the time because the pace is kind of okay for them. So I think it actually manages somehow to fit into that situation where it doesn't interfere, but it does substantially improve it for the people who feel like they need that extra speed and like want to go through things faster.
You mentioned that when you're developing a game, you need it to feel fun. And if it's not fun for you, what's the point?
Absolutely.
So with Sprint, does it feel more fun for you?
I would say that I was not a person who felt like I needed it. I would say that it's not that it made it feel more fun for me, it's that it didn't take away any of the fun that I was having, which is really important. Like it doesn't take away from that while still adding it for the people who do feel the need. And I know that like there are people like you who are probably you're much more of a clear speed guy than I am. I would say, at least that's like, okay.
Sure.
I would say that you are. Like, okay, maybe you don't even feel like but you're living in a different lane from most other humans.
Like,
I would say
monster to pack combat, I'm like barely even using it.
Right.
I'd say the part where there's a couple instances which is just like, I hate this level, I'm going.
Sure. And I absolutely use it that way as well, right? It's like,
I'm either leveled enough, or it's like, you get that like min-maxing, I just need to get to the next area, that way I can, because it's way higher XP rate there, you just get the like zoom through a level.
But you can use it pack to pack as well. Like it's a thing you can definitely do.
Yeah, you can, but I find it's like, especially in maps, depending on the density.
It does depend on the density, right? For sure.
If you're like pack and then to roll sprint for only like half a second to then do another pack, it's going to be pretty pointless. So. Depending on that, depends how much you invest into things like, it depends on your movement speed already. It depends on, there's a lot of different types of builds depending on what they are. Like if you're just like kind of steamrolling stuff already using a bunch of different abilities, you're probably less likely to use it in that moment. But all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I missed the boss room down there, and you missed the checkpoint, and sure, you can fast travel kind of close, and then you're just like, all right, I'm just going to zoom over there now. It is like perfect.
So it's definitely a lot better for that. Yeah. It is definitely a lot better for that
for
as well.
Just like, oh no, I missed this quest object. It's probably in this corner, and so you're just like running over there. Like very, 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 very helpful in that regard. And I would 100% say increases fun by removing what it was probably one of the most unfun things, which is just running through a desolate area that you've already cleared because you missed a bit in the corner, right?
It also has a side effect of making dodge roll slightly faster too. And the reason for that is because previously we couldn't, like the total time, if you were just doing dodge roll, that couldn't be faster than moving. But now it is actually allowed to be. So there was some slight tweaks to this because like since you can sprint anyway, it means the dodge roll can be very slightly faster. So there's a slight change there too.
Now, Jonathan also mentioned there are other little things as well, and just to like explain some of that, like Mercenary, for example, no longer slowed down while reloading.
That is a huge one. That for me
Right.
is drastic. Like,
Big
and
difference.
And the funny thing about that is that pre 0.1, it was actually kind of like that.
Yeah.
And it changed for various reasons. And so, like, honestly, for me, that makes the mercenary like to feel way better. And
There's
then shield blocking.
shield
right?
blocking,
It's faster.
less. You're, I guess. You're minus 50 instead of minus 70, which is so you could look at it as you're 67%
You're going,
faster.
you're
while,
going from 30 to 50, which
yeah,
is a big
so
bonus.
67% faster while you have your shield raised. There's a lot more investment, mostly on the big right half side of the tree, all the way from mercenary, all the way through to even sorceress for reducing the movement penalty while casting.
There's
if you
also
wanna
the
speak
slight
into
ramp increase, right? So the ramping speed from when you're at your slowest to when you go to your fastest, that recovers to full speed faster. There was like a tweak there, I believe.
Yeah, I can't remember the number.
I don't remember the number.
It's hard to
quantify anyway
that
because
one,
it's like
but yes,
but there's little tweaks like that to just make overall the smoothness, I guess, feel better. And I'm sure there'll even be more of that sort of stuff to come in the next like month or so that we've got for development. So
I'm noticing a pattern of there's a significant amount of focus on previous feedback points. There's like with the crafting additions, for instance, the mid-game golf, the movement speed here. Is there any other major focus points you wanted to tackle you were not able to get done in 0.3?
Well, I suppose there's one thing we didn't talk about yet, but is another focus point that's really important on that list, which I should mention, which is trade, right?
Oh,
so
you're
trade's,
right. Yeah.
Trade's a big one, right? Like that's a.
I want to ask you that trade question again for the fourth time.
Yeah. So trade, we have now fully asynchronous trade in PoE, not just for currency, right? So obviously currency's got it. We now have for items as well. I think it's going to change things very substantially. So that's going to be one of those big things. Yep. So you can go to people's hideouts. People will have an NPC in the hideout who will offer to effectively sell things on a market for you. You can give them items. You can set a price. Someone else can come to your hideout and buy those items where the buyer pays an extra gold fee that gets destroyed effectively. So this is kind of how the new trade system is going to work. I've like pretty much hinted at this for a long period of time now.
The Japan interview.
Yeah. But it's finally happening, I think it's going to change a lot of people's perception of just like what it's like to play in an item economy. So it's going to be.
This was something I feel like you guys were fairly firm about before. What?
So it is. So basically, here's the key thing, right? When trade is easier, what it does is it means that what most people would say is that it causes inflation, and that's one way to look at it. But the way that I kind of view this is effectively, if you look at the curve of like value to power, it makes it more exponential, right? You have like a huge flat part where like everything's valueless until suddenly everything's ultra expensive, right? Like that's kind of the thing you get. So the easier trade is to do, the more of that effect you'll get, right? If trade is like really, really hard, you get a pretty much flat curve where the value and the power kind of like line up. If as trade gets easier and easier, it becomes more and more exponential. And I don't think you want like completely linearity here. Like you do want a little bit of exponential, but we needed to find a way to effectively make it so that there is still something in trade that makes it not fully easy. But instead of it being a inconvenience factor, which is what it currently is, where like it's annoying to trade, so therefore you don't do it, now what it is a gold cost factor, where you have to get gold in order to be able to trade. So now there's just a straight up like, I can afford this or I cannot afford this type of thing. And because in PoE, gold is bound, what's league bound technically, but it's bound to your account effectively. Because of that, it means that you won't get a situation where like someone just tosses some item for like a freaking transmute or something into the thing that they don't care about, and then you just buy that at low levels for nothing, and then you're able to effectively compromise the game experience that way. What it will kind of basically do is it'll feel a bit like the shop, only the prices in gold are a bit more expensive, and then there's also like another price in currency that the other person's going to get. But then as you get towards the end game, like that effect of the gold will start to matter less, so I think that'll sort of work. But the other thing that having the gold means is that because you have to play to get it, and because it's destroyed when you buy things, the whole like flipping bots that like find things and like and able to like effectively high frequency trade the market, like that sort of stuff should be much harder because they're going to need to get gold from somewhere. there, and which means they have to play. So writing a flipping bot that kind of effectively exponentiates the market by like having this, the HFT stuff should hopefully not be a problem. So when we start out, because we're like ultra afraid, we're probably going to pitch the gold costs like a little over, just to kind of make sure that this like not too bad, and then we should be able to lower them down if it's not a problem, like to the point where so basically what I'm saying is like if the gold costs are a little too high at the start, just like try and forgive us for that. We're like a bit afraid, like we'll creep them down as we feel like the economy's fine, assuming that everything's good, and then we should be okay.
What was the turning point in which you decided, okay, we are going to try a fully in-game related trade system?
I wanted to do it, this particular trade system, for a while. It's just been, a little bit challenging to get it across the line. But I think that...
It might have been my raging about everyone being AFK finally.
Yeah. I mean, that is the issue, right?
That
is the issue.
Of a frustration that we're like, okay.
It did get worse over time. Like the trade, behavior, like the behavior of players got worse. I mean, like in a way that's completely just because they're incentivized to, right? Like there's the whole incentive of you just chuck something and trade for nothing, and then if a bunch of offers come in, then you're like, oh, this is worth a lot, and I'll jack the price up. Like this is the incentive that like happened over time.
Point.
That really is the thing, right? And so like that behavior, and it's like, I know why people do it, because it's exactly the best way to get to do stuff. But basically, because when you set something for trade now, someone could just come in and buy it. Like because of that, now you can't just do that anymore. You actually have to feel confident in a price.
100% the tipping point was when the more public acceptable meta became dump everything in a tab listed one divine, and if you get too many messages too quickly, you reassess it. Once that became it's growing more and more and more. Combined with the level of people who seemingly are just, I mean, they'll list things, I guess, for like 5C and with no intention of ever selling it because it's like an inconsequential amount of currency to them. And so when you're just trying to buy really cheap things, they're just like, I'm not going to leave my map for that, right? And sure, but annoyingly, it's listed, and some people are trying to buy it, and then they're just being like, I'm being ignored all of the time by everyone. So those things just became... So, I mean, yeah, sure, I say it's because of me. It becomes frustrating to pretty much a large majority of people.
So we effectively needed to find something that still had friction, but that friction was not that frustration. It was to just gold, right? Like I'm frustrated I don't have enough gold is a different type of problem than I'm frustrated that everyone's like doing these annoying behaviors, right? Like, and I think that's much more acceptable to players for that reason.
Do you expect this to fully resolve the trade-related concerns?
That is my hope. Look, there's going to be a lot of details to get right. Like, I mean, even just looking at it, like, for a few seconds, you can immediately start thinking of exploits, even with the system we've got, right? So there's stuff where, like, okay, so after you've priced something, we have to put a little cooldown on being able to reprice it so that, like, you can't just set a price and then someone comes and then now it's different. And then we're like, okay, so if someone clicks the item to travel to your hideout on the trade website, it, like, adds an extra little cooldown on that value so that, like, if someone's coming to buy it, you can't just, like, sort of see that that's happening and change it again. So there's, like, little things like that we have to like work out in order to kind of make sure that that's right. And I'm sure there'll be more things that players work out to do that we didn't think of, and we're going to have to make some more adjustments. But I think that once we've worked through all those, like whatever random cases there are, that should basically sort that problem out.
So that brings me back to my original question. Then we've talked about trade, but was there something that you guys wanted to have addressed that you're hoping to address in the next patch?
Well, I would say that, so we've got a lot of in-game changes we're making, but I'd say that there are still more in-game changes to make.
Well, we discussed some of them with the storylines and the feeling having more
exactly,
direction.
Right?
That is one of them.
Yeah.
So in my whiteboard in my office at one point, we were like,
here's the tier list of player issues.
We listed every problem that we could find. I mean, and then kind of started going, okay, what is a tier 1 problem? What is a tier 2 problem? We derived it all down to T1 and T2 problems, and we were like, okay, this patch we better have the best bloody excuse in the world for it to have none of these tier 1 problems be solved or at least mitigated with a hope of future solution, and ideally every tier 2 problem as well. And so first thing was like cruel difficulty, like having to play through the campaign twice. Second thing, and the problem is the answer to that is an act and an interlude, and it's like, okay, oh my goodness, we're already here and we're on to point number 1.
Well, something I should mention about that even though is that we weren't listing problems like the problem is called difficulty. We were listing problems like the problem, like, because the way a player would perceive it is the game is a slog. Like that is the actual problem a player has. So then it's like when you phrase it that way, you're thinking, okay, what are all the things we can do? So removing crawl is one thing, adding sprint is another, right? Like both of these two things are about that same issue, and it's like you really want to look at things from a player's perspective, not just a like what solution we might have in our idea list perspective, and that's kind of what's going to produce a more honest like actual answer as to, like what can be
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
So
Yeah, so what I'm writing down obviously being not necessarily the problem, it's more of a keywords. So we know what the problem is. We look into a whole bunch of stuff.
Literally on Mark's board at the top of the list was the game is a slog. That was the thing that was written on that board. It's like, how are we going to solve this problem?
Slog in quotes being that's what people call it.
Right.
And then I had trade. I had, our recent things with the networking.
There was build variety was like a big
character. We just had character classes, which to us is like, okay, we need a
variety of builds.
Improve the builds, improve the characters, improve the underpowered skills, the wrong decisions, the bad decisions, like bring all of that up. And we just had this massive list, and we just literally worked through and we checked heaps, and we're like, okay, have we sufficiently addressed all that? Okay, we've at least done something for all. Like, where can we focus more of our attention? And we look at it again. And so this is where the essence change came from. This is where our
crafting was on the list of like there's no mid-game crafting was a thing that we had.
And then we were like, how do we know our list is accurate? We did that a few times, and we then went to Steam and had people obviously doing it for us as well. And we also looked ourselves, and we're like, okay. And then often, there's a post on Reddit. It's like, I remember after we did 021, I think, the community made a post. They're like, so now that loot is addressed, what's the next biggest problems? And they made a post, and we correlated that to our list, and we added some things and changed some things, and all of a sudden, like, we ended up with like a, here's everything we need to address. Let's make sure we're addressing it. And this is where it does get annoying. We were talking about earlier about having to cut stuff, where it's like, okay, now the data's fixed. And we're like, oh, okay, in order to solve all of this, can we do it in the time frame? And then it's like very hard to say, we have to move this, because then we're effectively saying we're going to keep this problem in the game, and that's really hard to stomach.
And that's where some of that in-game stuff, it's like in an ideal world, we would have had like all of those like in-game quest stuff for like, like the quest line for, for Delirium or whatever. That would have been a thing that we would do. But I think it is better to release, in a time rather than delay for another like couple of months and make sure literally everything is solved.
But also addressing, progressing, whatever you want to call it at the end of the day. 18 out of 20 things is a massive win. And I think that I'd say this patch, more than most, has a focus on like addressing concerns, responding to feedback, ideally through a lot of creative ways. People might not even create the link between what the problem was and what the solution is, but that's where we then keep an eye on it and make sure it has actually solved the problem. And then we move to the next set, and the next set, and the next set, and you just keep going. Like, you never stop, right? Like, I don't even think there is anything on that list that we made a while back, mind you, that is on the tier 1 problem list that we didn't address. Now, obviously, everyone's going to have their own definition of a tier 1 problem.
And I'm sure they'll find new tier 1 problems to have.
Yes, and that is the thing. There will be new, and some tier 2 things will get promoted to tier 1.
It's like, who knows what random thing that will just blindside us completely that we're not expecting will happen, but,
Maybe the trade system, even though we can't think, maybe the trade system goes out and it remains a tier 1 problem somehow. Who knows? But the point being, it's important, and I'd say it's a process we haven't done this extensively before, like Jonathan and I in particular, of going like, let's make sure that we're actually addressing all of these major concerns, or have an understanding as to when we're going to do it or why we're not doing it now versus later, because there's a right solution, and if we rush it, we'll make it even worse and becomes a T0 problem, and get some problems like that. So yeah, it was actually quite a cool process, and I'm pretty sure it's all still written on my whiteboard. So.
What's going to be your metrics of success for 0.3 release? Where are you going to look at to determine whether or not you feel satisfied?
Oh, that's a tough one, because really what it comes down to is I don't want to, this is more of a personal way to answer this question, but I don't want to feel bad about how players think about our game. Right? Like, as long as I feel like people are generally positive about where we're going, like, look, even if people have problems, like, I don't want to feel like people think that the game is somehow like that we're not going to solve them or something like that. You know what I'm kind of getting at there? Like, I feel like there was a bit of there was a certain like vibe going on with 020 of like GGG doesn't even understand the players and that kind of stuff, and that really bothered me, right? Like, I was kind of like, you know what? Like, I feel like if even if people have problems, like that's kind of like, and we'll obviously try to solve them, but if they feel like we're never going to solve them, that's like really terrible, you know, like you do not want to feel that way. So like to me, success is like if people feel confidence that we're actually moving in the right direction. That's the thing that I will be caring about.
Yeah, I have a like when I know the things didn't hit how we wanted it to. Like I know people are unhappy with things and they're not playing. I actually really struggle to play. Yeah. Because I'm like, how can I be sitting here enjoying myself when all of these people that are our target audience aren't? Mm-hmm. And so often what ends up happening, and this is a real way to measure it, is that the more I get to play on the release weekend and that release week, the more I consider that success. And thus I get to play and I get to have fun with everyone. I have this like insane... I'm not allowed to have fun on the game if you know, if in general things are going badly. Like
well, it's because then we're suddenly sitting in a room having emergency meetings and trying to work out.
Yeah, and so I just work the whole time, and I'm like, I need to fix, and I get into panic, and you don't sleep properly and all of that. Yeah. But like, whatever, like a bit of boohoo to all of that. But ultimately, I just want to play the game and have fun and with everyone. And so when I get to do that, like when a league goes smoothly and there's no, be it either crashes, networking, technical problems, or just like, you know, the game is misbalanced and all of that. And so I often get this point where when stuff does go wrong, and there's a sort of an inevitability to it to some degree, you get to a point where it's like now things are stable and I'm like, oh, finally, yes, I can now play and enjoy it with everyone. And that's like, so... It sucks when that isn't straight away, and it sucks when that isn't like at least, you know, quite short. And so if I have to wait till all of a sudden Wednesday before I get to actually sit down and play properly, you know, it starts to feel a bit bad. So my measure of success is entirely the time frame between when it releases and when I get to feel like I can comfortably sit down and play without feeling bad for everyone. Because it does suck. It sucks when you miss the mark, like truly. And 020, 100%, we had a bunch of stuff miss the mark, and it felt terrible. But I'm sure it felt terrible because it felt terrible to everyone, right? Like so. Hopefully, you know, this release goes nice, amazing, smooth. Like I believe we've done our strategies this time were very different, very much more focused on solving problems, solving issues,
improving what's there. Was definitely a focus this time.
Questioning ourselves. I mean, with the things like trade, with the things like sprint, making sure that we're not just stuck up in our ways, kind of thing. Don't want any of that dinosaurism kind of going in where it's like, no, we refuse to do this. So like trying new things, compromising on things, doing things, and you know, I mean, I would even say a lot of that stuff surprises ourselves, and all of a sudden we're like, you know what? This is cool. Like, we were skeptical. This is fun. This is cool. People are going to love this. So a lot more of that coming in 03, I would suspect.
Well, let's end it on a fun note then. What do you think is going to be the thing that the players enjoy the most coming up?
I'm excited for Abyss. I'm actually excited for the fact that this is our first PoE 2 league. And if you want to think of it, because last league was core game. It wasn't really, it was like, okay, there's some spirits. You know what I mean? It was kind of a bit fluff. So this is like an actual league. It's an actual league, actual fresh economy, get to start, and it's like got a lot of narrative and depth and all of that. So I'm excited for that, because a lot of our players are not PoE 1 players, like a lot. And so a lot of these people might not even understand the concept of like a league and a fresh start and doing that. And so I'm kind of excited to see how everyone finds like, playing through the world again. You got a new act, you got a new interlude. Sure, the world has changed, the campaign has changed, but also now you've got this thing going on in every area that's like quite cool, and you're learning all this new stuff, getting new rewards and new items. So that's like my immediate the thing that straight away comes to mind. But new bosses is always fun. So
I think probably the change that I think, well, as long as we can execute it well, but I'm really hoping it's going to be the support gems. Like, it'll be, like, I think that'll be, like, I'm really hoping that's going to be the thing that people find the most entertaining. Yeah, I really do.
For our existing and more advanced players, well, even lower levels as well, but, like, especially for the more advanced players, that will be a huge one, 100%.
There's definitely, like, I think the support gems aren't hitting right now for a few reasons. Like, part of it's the recommendeds being bad and, like, things like that. There's stuff like that, and I really want to make that part of the game game, the feeling of leveling up. I want to get out of that like level 40 ditch of like not feeling player progression and stuff like that. I really want that to sort of feel better. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping will be the thing. It's a little hard to tell right now because there's still a lot of balance going on. There's a lot of changes happening at the moment. So yeah, but I'm really hoping that's going to be what it is.
Okay. Well, I think you answered all the questions. Appreciate you taking the time. 0.3.0, August 29th.
No problem.
It's 30th for you guys.
Yeah.
For the rest of us.
Thanks very much for being here. It's been
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
cheers.
It's been a lot of
It
fun
has
having you over. So
been quite enjoyable.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, thanks very much.
till next time.
Nice. Thank you.